you heard in the beginning, this is World Mission Sunday. There's about 1,100 dioceses around the world, and on this particular Sunday, in all the churches and all those dioceses, there will be a second collection for the spread of the gospel. And that's an important thing. When the French Jesuits came over to New York State way back when to bring the message of Jesus, especially to the Iroquois Indian nations, they had no written Bible. They didn't have a written language, so they devised an alphabet so they could, the Indians could read the scriptures in their own language. And so when you bring the idea of missions, it's quite a broad thing. It's not just talking about, go to church and go to confession, things like that. They have a whole sense of taking care of people. And we get a pre-glimpse of that in our first reading today with Cyrus. Cyrus was not a Jew. He was a pagan, a very powerful king. And yet he saw and listened to the inspiration of God. And he ended up building a new temple because he realized that he was, as an earthly ruler, an earthly power, it has to be used in the right way. And God inspired him to build the temple. So we have this beginning even in the Old Testament, that God reaches out in so many, many different ways. And of course, this silly argument that they were trying to trip up Jesus. And we do that all the time. We do it all the time. Have you ever heard, you say something and then you say to the person, "Don't you agree?" What's the answer supposed to be? What's the answer supposed to be? Yeah, you're supposed to agree with me. Don't you agree? And we try to force people that, rather than, do you agree? Much more honest way of doing this. Do you agree, not don't you agree? So we have that kind of thing we have to be careful of when we're talking with people. But here God is saying what we have to do is to be a true disciple of Christ. And that means we, first of all, we have to know to whom we belong. That's one of the reasons I have stopped celebrating my birthday. From now on, I'm celebrating the anniversary of my baptism, because that's when I became a member of the church. And all of you who are baptized, that's when you became a member of the church. It's a kind of a different way of looking at things. And what are my loyalties? If I'm going to be a disciple of Christ, what are my loyalties? You remember the paradigm? God first, spouse second, family third, work fourth, soccer 252. We should not be doing those things on the Lord's Day. But to have God, spouse, family, and that's the order we have to order our lives. That's what God has asked us to do that. So we have my loyalties, and what am I going to do with that? And then, whom should I serve? Am I going to serve my company first? Or am I going to serve God first? All disciples have to go through that kind of thinking. And on this World Missions Day, we have to bring the gospel to others. Now, I don't have enough money to buy a new temple. But I can speak to people. By the way, this is much more easy. It's easier for me than most people because I've got an audience, You have to listen to me anyway. And most of you are Catholic. I'm not out in that business world. I'm not in the neighborhoods like you are. And to bring God to bear. And we need to get in that habit of doing that, of bringing the news to others. And most of the people we're going to meet during the week will be Christian, at least in this country. Not all, of course, but most. And we need to talk about God. We have to raise up the awareness of God in our lives and the lives and where God should be in our civil society. As Jesus said, Caesar had a certain amount of power, and we should honor that. Earthly leaders, they have certain responsibilities. And authority comes from God, not from going through a revolution or anything like that, but it is following the law of God in their own particular part of our lives. That doesn't mean we shouldn't try to influence with our own faith and morals. We should be doing that, but they have to do that, and Cyrus did that. Other leaders have done that. St. Louis, just a saint who's a king. So that has to happen, but we have to do it on a personal basis as well. Because most of us don't work with heads of governments, but we are in the neighborhoods. And so bringing up God to others, speaking to God about others, raising the sense of, maybe God has something to say about this. I think it was Abraham Lincoln that said, somebody said, we're on God's side. And Lincoln said, well, that's not what I'm asking. I'm asking, am I on God's side? And that's the question. Not is that thing, but, am I on God's side? Am I doing what He wants me to do? So we all have a missionary mandate from Christ to go out to the world. And this collection we'll take up today, the second collection, this goes all around the world. In places where Christianity is very minusculely tolerated. To go to places where the church is persecuted. To a next door neighbor. We have to do that as well. So think about how you can be a little bit of a missionary this week. I always suggest this many, many times. Pick one of your neighbors, just one. Don't worry about the whole world, just one. Maybe one that isn't coming to church. And so you invite them to come with you. Say, look, let's go to Mass, and after Mass, we'll go have coffee and donuts. Why not? And just you begin to talk about godly things. That's the kind of thing we can do to have our own sense of missionary work. But there's this bigger area too, the whole world. And so our missionaries are in places that it's very dangerous for them. Very dangerous for them. They kind of hide sometimes because their lives are threatened. They have to be very careful how they dress, not having a cross hanging out or anything like that. We don't even think about that kind of stuff. But some of our missionaries, they have to deal with that. So in the second collection, put a little extra in so that we can help the Pope, help the bishops around the world, begin to bring the message of God to our world. We would be a much better society if we did that. Much, much better. Not that we're all perfect, okay, that's true. There are There are some Catholics in jail. But we don't talk about that very much, okay? We're not perfect. But look around and see how vicious parts of the world are. How bereft of hope and joy. We cannot stand idly and do nothing. That we cannot do. Because God didn't stand by and just watch. He came down and died on the cross. And he brought more truth to the world. Let us do the same.